After almost 30 years, the silence finally broke. On this day, in a Las Vegas courtroom, a jury heard opening arguments in what many thought would never happen. The only person ever charged with the murder of Tupac Shakur stood trial. First, the prosecution laid out a narrative built almost entirely on one man's recorded confessions, spanning more than 2 decades. Second, the defense challenged every piece of it, claiming there were no facts, only stories told by someone with every reason to fabricate. Third, a witness took the stand and contradicted a detail so central to the alleged killer's confession that it raised a fundamental question about what we can actually trust in this case. Fourth, a video surfaced from the same night showing something the prosecution's key narrative didn't account for. And fifth, we're left asking why federal investigators with access to these confessions back in 2008 never charged Kefi D Davis with anything. Was it because they didn't believe him, or because the evidence simply wasn't there? By the end of today, we're going to separate what's actually documented in the court record from what's become myth in nearly 3 decades of speculation. This is the Tupac murder trial, and it has begun.
In this world, silence means survival. The one person who has a hard time being silent is Dwayne Davis.
Really, at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, if what they're saying is really true, there are no facts to point to Kefi. Not one.
Day 1 of the trial of Dwayne Kefi D.
Here we are on day 1 of the trial of Dwayne Kefi D Davis, the only man ever criminally charged in connection with the killing of Tupac Shakur. Las Vegas, Nevada. A jury of 16. 10 women, 6 men, 4 alternates. The charges are murder with a deadly weapon with the intent to promote, further, or assist a criminal gang. The hip-hop icon was gunned down on the streets of Las Vegas back on September 7, 1996, in a drive-by shooting. And here's what we need to sit with right from the start. The prosecution is not arguing that Davis pulled the trigger. They're arguing he orchestrated it. He facilitated it. He got the gun, organized the vehicles, and made sure the shooters were armed and ready.
Here we are. After almost 30 years, day 1 of the murder trial for the only person ever criminally charged in connection with the killing of Tupac Shakur. Out in Las Vegas, Nevada, Dwayne Kefi D Davis is charged with murder with a deadly weapon with the intent to promote, further, or assist a criminal gang. And a jury will have to decide if he is guilty or not guilty. 16-person jury, 10 women, 6 men, 4 of them alternates. The hip-hop icon was gunned down on the streets of Las Vegas back on September 7th, 1996 in a drive-by shooting, and prosecutors allege that Davis orchestrated this killing. Not that he actually pulled the trigger, but that he facilitated it, that he aided in.
Nearly 3 decades. That's how long this case sat unsolved in the public eye. Tupac was killed in 1996. It's now 2026. For 28 years, there were no criminal charges, no trial, nothing. And that matters, because during those 28 years, a man allegedly confessed to this crime multiple times, in recorded interviews, to federal investigators, on camera on a beat television show, in a book he published himself. Yet no charges came until 2023. That gap between confession and consequences is where the real story lies. So the question becomes, what happened in all that time? Why did the FBI, the gold standard of investigation in this country according to the defense opening, have Davis on tape in 2008 and then do nothing? The prosecution's opening statement, delivered by prosecutor Binu Pal, painted a scene. September 7, 1996, Tupac came to Las Vegas to attend a Mike Tyson fight. After the fight, Tupac and his group, including Suge Knight, ran into Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand. That encounter was captured on video. And what happened in that video, according to the prosecution, was a beating. Orlando Anderson is Kefi D Davis's nephew, and according to prosecutors, what happened next in the 2.5 hours following that beating was Davis escalating and planning retaliation. Not retaliation by himself, but organized retaliation. He contacted Zip Martin, a connection to Bad Boy Entertainment from New York. Zip Martin had a gun. Davis got it. Davis organized 2 vehicles. In the white Cadillac, according to Davis's own alleged statements, were 4 people, Terrence Brown driving, DeAndre Smith in the rear driver's seat, Orlando Anderson Baby Lane in the rear passenger seat, and Davis himself in the front passenger seat. And then they saw Tupac and Suge Knight's car. They made a U-turn. They confronted them. and a shooting happened that night.
Way after opening statements. So, with that in mind, here is prosecutor Binu Palal laying out the scene, the stage, the context, the case against Davis.
On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur came to Las Vegas to attend a Mike Tyson fight. After the fight, Tupac, along with Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and other people that were with that group, ran into a person named Orlando Anderson. And Orlando Anderson is the defendant's nephew. And when they encountered Orlando Anderson sitting by himself, they attacked him. And that attack was captured on video. During those 2.5 hours, you will learn that the defendant was escalating and planning the...
Now, this case is built almost entirely on Davis's own words. That's crucial to understand. The prosecution doesn't have the murder weapon. The prosecution is not pointing to ballistics evidence or forensics tying Davis to the scene. What the prosecution has are recorded statements allegedly made by Davis himself over a span of years. Let me walk through the timeline of these confessions because the frequency of them, the consistency of certain details, and the contexts in which they were made, these are what prosecutors argue paint a picture of a guilty conscience. Or, as the defense will argue, a pattern of fabrication by a man seeking attention or leverage with authorities. In 2008, roughly 12 years after the murder, Davis was interviewed by a federal task force investigating the death of Notorious B.I, Christopher Wallace, who was killed 6 months after Tupac. According to the prosecution, Davis was picked up on a narcotics trafficking beat. He told investigators he didn't know anything about Biggie's killing, but he had information about Tupac. In that 2008 interview, recorded and transcribed, Davis allegedly walked through the entire event. The MGM confrontation with Orlando Anderson, the 2.5-hour window where Davis claims he organized the hit, the gun from Zip Martin, the white Cadillac, the U-turn when they spotted Tupac, and then the shooting itself. Davis allegedly told investigators that if Tupac had been on his side of the vehicle, he would have shot him. But because Tupac was on the other side, he handed the gun to DeAndre Smith in the back seat. And when Smith didn't shoot, he claims Orlando Anderson took the gun and fired into the vehicle.
Dwayne Davis, along with Terrence Brown, DeAndre Smith, and Orlando Anderson, decide to make a U-turn, confront Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. Dwayne Davis has the firearm. It's a firearm he got from Eric Von Zip Martin, and then he passes it to the back. Dwayne Davis says that if they were on his side, if Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight were on his side of the vehicle, he would have shot them himself. But because they were on the other side, he handed it to DeAndre Smith. DeAndre Smith, according to Dwayne Davis, did not want to shoot at that time, so Orlando Anderson shot into that car.
This is important to mark here. The defense will later say that Davis was clearly making this up, that he was inventing details to seem useful to investigators, to perhaps negotiate a position in a narcotics case against him. Or, the prosecution will argue, he was confessing to a crime he actually committed, with details only someone present could know. Both interpretations are in the record. In 2009, a year after that federal interview, Davis sat down with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Detective Dan Long. In this interview, Davis was more guarded, according to the record, but he still admitted to being in Las Vegas that night, being mad about what happened to his nephew, being the boss, being in the white Cadillac, and procuring the firearm that killed Tupac. No charges were filed after this interview either. The Clark County District Attorney's Office, after Detective Long brought back the confession, declined to charge the case. The defense will point to this fact repeatedly. If Davis was confessing to orchestrating Tupac's murder, why didn't law enforcement charge him in 2009? Was it because they investigated his statements and found them unreliable or perhaps unverifiable? Or was it something else entirely?
In 2009, Davis is being so helpful to federal authorities that he actually flies out to New York to try and get Zip Martin to implicate himself in the Tupac Shakur murder. Zip Martin at that time was dying of cancer, was out of the game, and really did not engage with Dwayne Davis.
Then, in 2017, Davis made a decision that seemed to change everything. He agreed to appear on a Betty television show called Death Row Chronicles. In that appearance, he explained his motivation. He said he was probably the only person alive who knew the truth about Tupac. People had been pursuing him for 20 years, magazines seeking interviews. He decided to go public. In 2018, Davis took another step. He published a book. And in that book, according to the prosecution, the core remained consistent. The beating of his nephew, his presence in Las Vegas, getting the gun, being in the white Cadillac, handing the gun to someone else who fired into Tupac's car.
Davis decides to go public. He's approached by the producers of a show called Death Row Chronicles that appears on BET. And this is just a small portion of what he says is his motivation for appearing.
Only one of the DVD days, I was popping, kingpin, drug dealer. I'm the only one alive that really can tell you the story about the Tupac Shakur. People have been pursuing me for 20 years. Newspapers, magazines. I'm coming out now to tell the story because I got cancer. I got nothing else to lose.
What the prosecution emphasizes across all of these statements spanning from 2008 to 2019 is a persistent emotion, anger. Visceral, sustained anger at Tupac for what was done to his nephew, and prosecutors argued in opening statements that this anger, maintained even 28 years later, was evidence of genuine participation in the crime. A real perpetrator, they suggested, would still carry that weight, that heat, decades on. The defense opening statement, delivered by Davis's attorney Michael Samp, took an entirely different approach. He posed a direct question to jurors. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself if what they're saying is really truth or fiction, fact or fiction. There are no facts to point to Kefi D, he said. Not one. The defense outlined 3 core arguments. First, there is no other evidence tying Davis to this crime. No DNA, no fingerprints, no murder weapon in prosecution hand. The defense noted, and this is worth sitting with, that the prosecution doesn't have the gun. Without the weapon, certain categories of evidence simply don't exist. Second, the defense argued the investigation was sloppy and incomplete. And third, the defense directly attacked Davis's confessions. They argued he made it all up. The defense pointed to something specific about the investigation. LPD called Detective Long in Las Vegas and told him they had the gun that killed Tupac, and they'd tested it. Detective Long traveled to LA, got the gun, transported it back to Las Vegas, and had it tested. It came back as not a match. Not consistent with the murder weapon. And then, according to the defense opening statement, LAP told him something striking. We gave you a big gun to test you out. That phrase, whether accurate or not, suggests some level of investigative dishonesty or at minimum confusion in the handling of evidence. The defense also raised another point. 3 of the 4 people allegedly in that white Cadillac were dead by the time Davis gave his 2008 statement. But one person was still alive. That person was never interviewed to verify Davis's account. Why not? The defense asked jurors to consider that question.
LAPD reached out to him, called him up and said, hey, Detective Long, we have the gun. And we've tested it, and it matches back to what you're looking for in terms of the weapon that killed Tupac Shakur. Detective Long goes to LAPD, gets the gun, transports it back, gets it tested, and it comes out as not a match.
And then there was the issue of Detective Clifford Mack, the retired Las Vegas police detective who took over the case in 2017. The defense argued in opening statements that Mack never conducted a traditional investigation. When the case went to the grand jury, Mack testified, and according to the defense, all he did was read pages of Davis's book directly into the record. He never independently verified the book before reading it into testimony. He never wrote reports documenting his investigative efforts. From 2017, when he took over, until he retired in 2023, he never wrote a single report. This is significant because investigations typically generate documentation. Police officers write reports, they file updates, they create a record. And the defense suggested this absence of documentation was itself telling.
And Mr. Mogg goes to the grand jury. And in the grand jury, it's a secret proceeding. We're not there. The defense, isn't sitting like we are here. It's just the prosecutors. There's a panel of people called the grand jurors, and you have people come up and they testify under oath. And there's really no way for the defense to challenge any of it because it's done in secret. We don't really know about it. But in this particular case, Mr. Mogg is sworn to testify truthfully. And you know what Mr. Mogg does? He just reads pages of the book into the record. He doesn't do any more in terms of an investigation than read pages of a book into the record. He never documents in any of his efforts any verification of the book before he reads it into the record. He walks up, gets on the stand, and reads the book as if it's the gospel truth. What you're going to find out about Mr. Mogg is that he never wrote a report. So when he took over the case in 2017, all the way up until when he retired in 2023 and was in front of the grand jury, he never wrote a report.
The prosecution's witnesses took the stand on day one. The first witness was a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police officer named Gary Dale, who was working a bike team the night Tupac was killed. Officer Dale testified that before the shooting occurred, he had stopped a black BMW with no license plates, occupied by what he believed to be Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur. About 10 minutes after the shooting, Officer Dale and his partner approached a vehicle in the median of the road. Suge Knight was outside the vehicle talking. Tupac was being removed by EMS, and here is where it gets significant. Officer Dale testified that he tried to ask Tupac who his assailants were, and Tupac allegedly responded, "No, we'll take care of it. We'll take care of it." Prosecutors presented this as evidence that Tupac knew who did this to him, and if there's a continuation of events, they suggested, from Orlando Anderson's beating to this drive by shooting, then maybe Tupac did know. Maybe he understood the cause. But whether that's circumstantial evidence or mere speculation is precisely what a jury will have to decide.
Listen to this account of what happened after the shooting, and I will tell you, it is chilling to hear and legally potentially important for the prosecution.
Fast forward about, let's say, 10 minutes later, something unusual happened. What happened?
We were continuing riding on the strip area. We were heading southbound on the boulevard, and we heard some calls come out about a vehicle. Can't remember exactly what was said, but heading up towards Harmon, we saw the vehicle that had been described in the median of the road. It looked like it had ran up on the median and was stopped there in the middle of the boulevard.
What do you do when you see that?
We approached the vehicle.
Is it you and Mr. Goldgart? Or Officer Goldgart?
Officer Goldgart and I.
And do you see either the two people that you saw earlier in the vehicle?
Yes.
And who is that?
Marion Knight was outside of the vehicle, walking around, talking, and Tupac Shakur was being removed by EMS people.
As Marion Knight is talking, do you recall anything he's saying?
He was telling us to take care of Tupac Shakur.
Are you able to have any sort of communication with Mr. Shakur?
He was still talking, and I was trying to convince him to tell me the name of whoever his assailants were.
And did he ever respond?
Yes, he responded, no, we'll take care of it. So, something like that.
No, we'll take care of it.
Something like that.
Talk about that large gold chain we see in that photograph right there. The second time you came across Mr. Shakur, was he wearing that gold chain that's around his neck?
No.
So the thing that came into my mind, did Tupac Shakur seemingly know who did this to him? And if there's a continuation of events here, Orlando Anderson, and then this is retaliation.
The second witness called by the prosecution was Ingrid Stokes, who claims to have been on the Las Vegas Strip that night, in a car very close to Tupac and Suge Knight's vehicle when the shooting occurred. She testified that her friend knew Suge, and they pulled up next to his car to say hello. They were just driving, hanging out in a convertible, and a car behind them kept trying to pass them. She described it as white, four-door. They were trying to get away from that car, not pursue it. She was on the scene, she testified, and the police treated her and her friends as suspects, had them sit on the ground on the sidewalk. But here's where it gets interesting, and where a real contradiction begins to emerge. When the defense cross-examined Stokes, they asked her about specific details from Davis's confessions. They asked if Tupac was hanging out the window, yelling to his fans. Stokes said absolutely not. No. She testified that when they pulled up next to Suge's car, Tupac was relaxed, sitting in the passenger seat, listening to music like they were listening to music. He wasn't leaning out the window. He wasn't yelling Tupac, Tupac, trying to get people's attention. There were no fans around, she said. Just people driving and listening to music.
Now I want you to listen very carefully to what she says when questioned by the defense on cross-examination.
When we pulled up on the side of him and she was talking to Suge, he was relaxed, like sitting in the sitting in the passenger seat. And Suge was relaxed talking to Lauren. Nothing, like there was no engagement.
Okay, so as you're sitting there and you pull up, Tupac was not hanging out the window and doing something out of the window.
Absolutely not, no.
Okay. His torso was not sitting on top of the window yelling to his fans, Tupac, Tupac.
No,
like
there was
that.
no fans around. They were just driving in the car listening to music like we were.
What I took away from that, does that account contradict what Kefi D said in one of his interviews, where he seemingly claimed that people were yelling, Tupac, Tupac, and he was leaning out the window? She seems to disagree with that account, or her account's different.
Now, this matters because Davis's alleged confessions include details about people yelling Tupac's name, about Tupac being visible, drawing attention. And if a witness who was there contradicts that narrative, then the jury is left asking which account is accurate. This is the first real crack in the prosecution's timeline. And it's not a small one. It goes to the reliability of the person whose confessions form the foundation of this entire case. If Davis was making up details about what Tupac was doing in the car, what else might he have fabricated? And here we arrive at a question that's been sitting in the background of this case for 16 years. Why didn't anyone charge Kefi D Davis in 2009, after his confession to Detective Long, after the task force interview in 2008? Why did he walk free for 14 more years? The defense suggested one answer in opening statements. Because law enforcement investigated his statements and realized we can't verify this information. We don't believe this to be true, but the prosecution might offer a different explanation, one that doesn't rely on finding Davis unreliable. Maybe it was political. Maybe evidence got mishandled. Maybe bureaucracy moved slowly. Maybe there were other cases considered more pressing. There are many possibilities, and the record doesn't fully explain the gap. What we do know is this: the FBI had Davis on tape. The LA knew about his statements. Local police in Las Vegas knew. Yet for nearly a decade and a half after his confessions, he was never charged. He published a book. He went on television. He lived openly in Las Vegas. This gap is one of the elements that makes this trial genuinely worth examining rather than dismissing or accepting at face value. Both possibilities are real. Either Davis was guilty and law enforcement's failure to act was a remarkable oversight, or Davis was confabulating and law enforcement's decision not to charge him reflected their skepticism. The trial will be the place where evidence gets tested. One element of this case that often gets underexplored in typical coverage is the role of Zip Martin, the connection to Bad Boy Entertainment, who allegedly supplied the gun. Martin was dying of cancer when Davis allegedly went to New York in 2009 to try and get him to implicate himself. Martin, according to the record, didn't engage with Davis. Martin died not long after. He was never charged. He was never deposed. His account of events never went on the record. In some ways, this absence of testimony is itself part of the story. We only know Zip Martin through Davis's alleged statements about him. We don't have Martin's version of any of it. The prosecution's case, boiled down to its essence, is this: a man was beaten on camera. His uncle organized a response. He got a gun. He arranged a crew. They confronted the person he believed was responsible. Shots were fired. And now, many years later, that uncle has confessed repeatedly in various settings to his role in orchestrating that retaliation. The prosecution will ask jurors to see the pattern in that confession, the consistency of core details, the persistence of it across decades, and conclude that Davis is telling the truth about his guilt. The defense's case, boiled down, is this: there is no physical evidence. There is no independent corroboration. There is only one man with multiple reasons to tell authorities what they want to hear. and he's crafted a detailed story around events that were widely known in the public record. A person can construct a false narrative using true details and true timelines. The defense is suggesting the jury will have to decide which interpretation survives scrutiny. What we're witnessing here is not just a trial about who killed Tupac Shakur. Though it is that, we're witnessing a trial about how much weight to give a confession without corroborating evidence, about investigative practices across nearly 30 years and multiple jurisdictions, and about the line between compelling narrative and actual proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The trial will continue. More witnesses will testify. More documents will be introduced. And at its end, 12 jurors will have to answer the question the defense posed on the first day. Is what they've seen and heard truth or fiction? That's the moment that has been waited for nearly 3 decades. And now it's underway.